Well, obviously, thank you to those that have joined already. Hopefully, there's going to be some more as we go as well. It will be Dr. Natalie Walsh who will be hosting and chairing this session. And we've also got some amazing panelists that I will leave to introduce themselves. So over to you, Natalie, and look forward to hearing the content.
Great, thanks, Ian. Well, firstly, it's lovely to be here with you all this evening. My name is Natalie Walsh. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurial Development in the University of Galway, which is based in the west of Ireland. And my role in the university is to support a campus community of innovators, entrepreneurs, and creators. So I'm really interested in tonight's topic in terms of my own lived experiences of leading unit through COVID, and to hear from our esteemed panel of their experiences in both the challenges but the opportunities that COVID has presented to us. So I might just start by calling on the panel to give an introduction and to give us a little sense of their background, so we can understand the perspectives that they're speaking from. So Michael, I might call on you first, if that's okay, if you could introduce yourself.
Great. Yeah, good to see you, Natalie, and hello to everyone watching live and everyone who will watch this on recording. I'm Michael O'Brien. I'm based here in the States outside of New York City. Spent 22 years in corporate pharma and commercial roles, and today I'm an executive coach and meditation teacher and the creator of the Pause, Breathe, Reflect app to help us stress less and connect better. So good to be here. So I'll pass it back over to you, Natalie.
Thank you. Tanya, could I ask you to introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Tanya Thomas, currently VP of Regulatory and Medical Affairs at Opiant Pharmaceuticals, which is a biotech based in California. And prior to this role, I've held various senior leadership roles across several geographies worldwide at Pfizer and GSK.
Thank you. And Marianne, could I ask you to introduce yourself?
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Marianne Mello. I am based in London. I'm a medical doctor and also entrepreneur. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of them.
Marianne, you seem to be breaking up on us a little bit. Or a lot. Okay, so we might move along and we can come back to Marianne once her technical difficulties have been resolved. So I might just set a little bit of the context for this evening. This evening's session is kind of built on the Xplore Talks podcast, and our panelists this evening have all contributed in that regard. So what we thought we would do is kind of bring the podcast to life in terms of an interactive session where I get to ask some questions, but we also open it up to our attendees. So if you do have questions throughout the session, please feel free to use the Q&A function of the webinar, and we'll put the questions to the panelists. So I might... Marianne, you're back to us. Would you like to introduce yourself again there? We lost you.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I had a bad connection. I have a very bad connection here today. I'm not sure where I stopped, but basically my background, I'm a medical doctor. I've been involved with innovation since my graduation. And I am the Chief Medical Officer of the MDX, where we use artificial intelligence to support frontline practitioners with the clinical assessments.
Great, thank you. So what I might do is I might actually ask this question to all of our panelists. We are waiting on one panelist to join us who's had some technical difficulties. And Tanya, I might start this with you. In terms of the main challenges you faced during COVID as a female in your role.
Yeah. So yeah, during the pandemic, I think I, like many other people, and a lot of women, I really stopped and thought about, you know, what am I doing in my career? You know, what can I be doing right now at this time of like public crisis? Where can I be providing the most value? So at the time I was working in big pharma, I think it was at GSK, and I just started thinking about, you know, where could I be using my expertise from big pharma to make more of an impact on society at this time of crisis. And I mean, I think I wouldn't have got there if it hadn't been for the pandemic. I wouldn't have had that way of thinking. So I left big pharma and I took a job in a small biotech company, Opiant, focused on addiction. And in the US, we're facing, you know, a crisis with the opioid overdose, which has gotten worse during COVID. And so, you know, that was sort of a risky move, you know, leaving the security of big pharma, moving to a small biotech. But looking back, I think it was really about sort of reframing my life and reframing my career and priorities during a crisis. And I think that that's what a lot of women went through at the time. And some women, you know, we looked at our priorities and we sort of chose whatever was the better choice for us. And for some women that meant leaving the workforce, which I'm really, really happy to be on this panel to discuss that, because I think it's a huge problem. We should be doing more to, you know, deal with it and bring women back. But as you say, there were also opportunities. You know, it was a chance to relook at your values and your goals and say, what can I be doing? It was like a shake-up for me. So that I think was my big challenge, but also my opportunity during the pandemic.
Thank you, Tanya. Marianne, I might come to you to ask for your experiences or your challenges through COVID. Okay, I think we may be experiencing more technical problems. Michael, I might come to you and we can come back to Marianne if she resolves. Oh, okay, Marianne, you're back to us.
I changed my Wi-Fi, that's why.
I'll maybe ask the question again. The main challenges you faced during COVID, particularly being as a healthcare worker, what was your experiences and the challenges you faced?
Yes, so during the first year of the pandemic, I completely agree with Tanya. It was like the moment that everyone kind of like took that time of a very bad crisis to rethink your life and how you can support the society. At that time, it was very frustrating for me because I moved, you know, I transferred my medical license to the UK. And there was like some bureaucratical issues that I couldn't work as a doctor at that in the first year, which made me really frustrated because at that stage I really want to be helpful for the society. But on the other side, I'm working with digital health that played a very big part in the pandemic, and it's probably one of the sectors that grow the most with the pandemic. So it was a very good time to actually speak with healthcare, like the decision makers, that before they would not talk to you because they were completely risk adverse to accept any new technology that would disrupt the way that we see healthcare today. So even though I couldn't work and be like a frontline practitioner as I wanted to be, that period was very important for me because it was the first time that we actually got open doors to speak with managers and you know, clinical directors on how we could implement digital technologies into healthcare. So for me, it was a very good period. You know, personally, I being like very in a selfish way. I believe that I grew a lot and I had like more opportunities during that time than before to grow my company. And but I do believe that most of women, they did not have the same experience than me, especially if you you know, if you have kids. And it was the first time that people start working from home and that was a completely different a completely different scenario that no one ever experienced before. And I do believe that if I had a family at that point, I don't think I would be able to get all the opportunities that I had, especially because I would had to focus in everything else that was going on. So for me, it was a good opportunity and open doors, but I do see that was not the same case for most of the women in the workforce.
Thank you. So Michael, from your experiences and what you've observed and researched, what would you have seen as being the main challenges that have come to the fore?
Well, I think there are many, and Tanya sort of alluded to some. Certainly companies have seen a whole host of women breaking up with their companies and leaving the workforce altogether. And I think one of the things that sort of drove that is that women, for their families, serve as the chief medical officer. Now, in my role with the Healthcare Business Women's Association, we did a webinar with our Milan chapter, New York and Milan, at the start of the pandemic. So this is April of 2020. I had a hope that things would sort of balance out as far as responsibilities, because everyone came home and we would all roll up our sleeves and get to work. And that did not happen. There is a over-indexing of the burden that women have experienced with homeschooling for their children, as I just mentioned, being the chief medical officer at home, plus doing the day job. And so there's just more of the work has been placed on women's shoulders, less of the pay and less of the recognition. So I think as you fast forward through the pandemic, many women are like, well, I don't want to sign up for this. And to Tanya's point, I think many women decided to stop, take a breath and look around to say, okay, how do I want to contribute in the world? How do I wish to honor the values I wish to honor, going through something that has changed us all in one way or another, and decided to get, decided to take this moment and maybe shift in the way they wanted to shift. So Marianne and Tanya both shifted in really remarkable ways, and but other women have shifted in different ways. And I think there's, hopefully a little bit more agency or ownership that women feel like they have over their careers, that one size does not fit all. But, when the pandemic occurred, it's just, and the data proves this out by any consulting group you want to look at, McKinsey, Accenture, you name them. It all points to women were given a disproportional amount of the burden as we travel through the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michael. I in preparing for today, I kind of reflected on my own experiences of COVID, and I remember fondly seeing colleagues' children bobbing in and out of calls, and within our environment, we have a very kind of supportive environment, but I could see the stress it was putting on them in terms of wanting to be their professional self, but needing to be that CMO and that parent in that moment. So I have an adult child, so it wasn't an issue for me, but you could feel that they were kind of torn between being the parent and being the professional, and it's just such a difficult place to be. We might lighten the COVID experiences now and talk to some of the positives or the opportunities that presented themselves as a result of COVID, because we definitely have seen, in terms of our connectivity tonight, some of the benefits that happened in terms of technology as an enabler and kind of reframing and refocusing. So Michael, I might come to you first this time and maybe give us some of your experiences of the positives that we are experiencing as a result of COVID.
Well, Natalie, I think you just mentioned the big one, right? So we've been able to come together via Zoom, or others come together via Microsoft Teams. It was beyond a lot of people's imaginations that we'd be able to do it, like this. So the whole myth that I have to watch you work to trust that you're working, which is a myth pretty much rippled by white dudes, that whole power of I have to watch you, you have to be in the office. So COVID blew up that myth. So it gives much more flexibility to the workforce in terms of either a fully virtual model or a hybrid model. I think that's really cool. And here in the New York area and a lot of major metropolitan areas in the States, people didn't have to commute anymore. Now, what happened for most people, white collared workers, if you will, they traded their commute time for more work time, as opposed to a little maybe self-care. How do I handle the stress of the moment? Maybe I pick up something to read. So we just decided to have more Zooms. Not the healthiest outcome, but we sit now on the cusp of working differently. Now we can start recruiting people all over the world, right? If you had a brick and mortar location and you made everyone come into that, well, that limited your talent pool. Now companies I have clients who have gone all virtual, so they can hire people not only where they have offices in the States, but all around the world, and they're doing just that. So what great flexibility has come from that. So there's the flexibility that's come through COVID, I think has been fantastic. I do hope, and I like to say that the whole experience has given people enough of a pause moment to think about how healthy are they? Like how are we promoting better health? It's brought forward a conversation about mental health that wasn't there before the pandemic. We would never talk about mental health at work. Now we're getting better at talking about mental health. We have still a long path to travel. We're still not good about it. We're still more open to talk about our knee injury as opposed to maybe the anxiety we feel. But it's opened that door, and that's overall a good thing because mental health is health. It's overall wellness. Most of our jobs in healthcare, we get paid for what's upstairs. We're not building things. So our mind has to be healthy for us to make proper decisions to deliver on the promise of health to our patients. So I think there's a lot of fabulous things. Those are just a few that I'll name here that have come from this moment, sort of in the spirit of no mud, no lotus. We went through a lot of mud over the last two and a half years. And I think the lotus flower that blooms on the lily pad is starting to bloom a bit, although some of the story is still yet to be defined.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. I love the no mud, no lotus. I'll definitely be robbing that one. Marianne, could I ask the same question of you in terms of opportunities? And I know you mentioned some earlier, but are there any other opportunities that you experienced as a result of COVID?
Well, yeah, I have to agree with Michael. I think that the main opportunity here now is flexibility. So, for example, we have I have some people working for a company in Brazil. We have like some developers in Eastern Europe, and this would not happen before because we did not have like the concept of remote working as we have today. So which is great for teams because you increase your diversity, you have like, different thoughts from different parts of the world on how to solve problems. But I also see this like, which was a problem in the beginning of the pandemic as a burden for women mainly because they have the, the responsibility for the care of the kids mostly. But now that we got used to it and we learn how to work from home, I believe that is a good opportunity. We have given opportunity for women to work from home and still like give support to their kids, which would not happen before the pandemic, with where we used to go to the office every single day. You would either have to put have someone to take care of your kids, or you would not work at all. And today, even though it is still like a big burden on women's shoulders because they now have 2 jobs to do, we at least are giving the opportunity for some of them that would not do so in a different situation. So I think that's definitely something positive, especially for women, the flexibility of work today.
Thank you. So we talked a lot about hybrid and remote working being a huge opportunity through COVID, but I suppose our experiences of building social capital in organizations has traditionally happened through being physically together and through the water cooler chats and a coffee with colleagues. So I'd be interested for your perspectives on how you build the social capital with the team where you're working in either a fully hybrid, or you have kind of combined, or fully remote, or you have a hybrid working environment. And I'll open this up maybe for anybody who wants to kind of jump in and speak to it.
Yeah, I mean, I work in a fully hybrid virtual role at the moment with teams across the US and the UK. And even my team in the US is not, we're all virtual. So the way we handle it is by, weekly check-ins, weekly non-work check-ins as well, but definitely increasing contact and increasing communication, and chances for communication has been my go-to solution for this. I don't feel disconnected from my team, and I've constantly asking them. So I think the solution to this is increasing communication. I constantly ask them, how are you feeling? I think that they also don't feel the lack of, social capital, but we also, when we do feel it, we communicate, and then we arrange an in-person meeting. So we've been doing that as well, once a month, if not once every 2 months. And that really, really helps us a lot, progress a lot of things, but also just feel connected. So I think it's a mix of both.
Anybody else have any thoughts on this one?
Well, I can add to Tanya's thoughts. So really speaking to a hybrid model. So Tanya's model is all virtual, which is great, which does put everyone in the same, or on the same playing field, much like the old office, like everyone is in the same condition. The hybrid model, now you have maybe a different level of status. So I think leaders do need to be mindful of proximity bias, of or another way of looking at out of sight, out of mind. And so Marianne's already spoken about how women might sign up more for at-home work. So now they want to take advantage of this newfound flexibility, which is fantastic, but now they're not in the office, or they may not be in the office the days some decision makers around talent are in the office. So those leaders, those decision makers or influencers in companies, especially around talent and how talent progresses, they need to be mindful that they're not gravitating towards just the people that they're spending a lot of time with because they're in the office, the proximity bias that I talk about. So it's something new that we didn't really have to think about back when everyone came into the office. Now we have to be mindful of that, and especially since we think that women will sign up more for work from home than maybe men will. We don't want to disadvantage women even further. And I think the stuff that Tanya said is like spot on and gold, right? So just check in often, do the transactional to-do list stuff that we do with our weekly check-ins, but also making time just to say, hey, how are you doing? And connect with people as humans. So we're not robots. We have to find a way for people to feel heard, seen, and appreciated. And that's how we get to start making cultures that feel like people belong, which are braver and more trustworthy.
Yeah, I think as you say it, like we have a small team here, and we have one team member who's working hybrid and the rest of the team are in person. And we've definitely had, occasions where it has been, how did you not know that? Because there are so many of us in the office, and we're kind of shocked. But it has forced us to kind of consider, well, how are we communicating? and when are we communicating, because the person is in the office a number of days. So we've had to kind of adjust, you know, what would have been maybe an informal conversation into a little bit more of a structured sequence of activities during the week, just to make sure that there is that feeling of inclusion and that we are all on the same page, which, you know, it speaks to that as well. Marianne, did you have any thoughts or experiences on this in terms of the social capital piece?
Yes, well, I think that that's probably like what we lost the most you know, with this new way of working. And I don't think we even say, but for my team, as we have some people that are not working here in the UK, even though our model is completely hybrid, we do organize it every 2 weeks, a in-person like lunch, so then we can, you know, connect with each other. And that's something that's not possible for someone that's in all the countries. So those people end up missing out, even though we do include them in the team meeting via Zoom. Is not exactly the same. The connection is never going to be the same through a Zoom call. I think that the solutions that Tanya and Michael has described, they're great, and I think that is a very good, you know, it's an effort actually connecting with people. But we're going to have to find other solutions, because it's not exactly the same. Then you have a co-worker in the same place than you, and then you go for a coffee, and naturally you share something about your life that is completely different of you scheduling a Zoom call and try to have an informal conversation. And you can do that for some time, but then you know, if at some point that be the first thing that you're going to take off of your calendar, because you're doing this just to try to have a connection, but it's not a natural connection. So I think that for teams that were in person before the pandemic, that moved to a hybrid mode, that probably it works well. But I feel that for people that has joined after the pandemic in this new make them part of the same team that you have before. And yeah, so I think that is probably one of our main challenges with the new way of working today. And I don't think we do have a good solution for that yet, especially for women. That's probably the ones that are today.
Actually, I was just remembered while you were talking, Marianne, I've seen a model in some smaller pharmaceutical companies, which I think is amazing and could be an idea going forward, is to set up regional hubs of basically where your workforce is located. I mean, in my company, we kind of work like that because a lot of us are East Coast, a lot of us are West Coast. So we gravitate together on the East Coast, you know, but I've seen it happening more formally in some companies where they set up regional hubs where the workforce is located, and then you get the in-person time as well as the Zoom. So that could be an idea for companies going forward.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good point.
So we might move along, and this relates to something you've just discussed, Mariana, in terms of hiring practices and recruitment. So the importance of inclusivity and diversity within your industry, and have you noticed any impact on your hiring practices in relation to COVID? Because Tanya, you specifically mentioned, you know, that ability to step away and say, this isn't for me. So are there things you're seeing within your industries that COVID has directly impacted from a recruitment perspective? Again, I'll open that up if anybody has any thoughts on it to share with us.
Well, I can go first. Yes, I can go. So we are a very small company. So before the pandemic, our hiring process was, you know, was still very small. We were just starting, so it would be more through our network than actually through a recruitment process. But what I noticed, so we start properly hiring during the pandemic and after the pandemic, so I don't have a good comparator with how it would be before. But what I noticed is that it's actually very difficult to find the right candidates, because now, as we are open, like our pool of candidates is bigger, because we're not like restricted to one location. You receive like CVs and applications from so many candidates, and most of the times they're not exactly the type of people that you're looking for. So I think that now, it's good because you have a bigger pool of candidates, but then at the same time, most of the candidates are not the right candidates for you. But I definitely do believe that is right now with the hybrid work is a lot easier for you to increase your diversity with your team, and to have people from different backgrounds that would not have otherwise if you're restricted to one location.
Thank you. Michael, Tanya, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would add that, in hiring now, I'm very, very conscious about making hiring decisions which are based on inclusion, which I feel like I am more able to do now, because someone can apply for a job who wants to work from home because, of childcare, whatever. And I'm very conscious as a hiring manager to include those candidates and not exclude them, that maybe unconsciously I would do, prior to the pandemic. But I think it's brought that inclusion and diversity really to the forefront, and it's something we can act on every day.
Thank you. Michael, did you want to jump in?
Well, in my position as an executive coach, I'm not hiring a lot of people, but I see it through the lens of my clients. I think there's a great opportunity for companies to recruit the women that tapped out of the workforce during the pandemic, to bring them back. I think it should be a full-on campaign to bring that intelligence, that knowledge base back into companies. It was a pretty significant brain drain, if you will, as some have called it. So I think from a recruitment perspective, a people team perspective, if companies are not sitting on the table figuring out how do we bring back this qualified group of workers, I think the companies are going to be in a not so great position to deliver again on the promise to their stakeholders and shareholders. So I see that as a really ripe opportunity. I think what Marianne and Tanya have already spoken to, again, spot on. It's been tough because we've, at least here in the States, we've talked about the Great Resignation. People are reshuffling and they have more options. For the first time in a long time, really since the turn of the century, salaries are starting to move in a positive direction for workers. So employees are basically looking for their best environment, which gives them a lot of voice, which is great. It is then putting the companies in a position to say, we have to figure out how we're going to be working in this post-pandemic way. The way we used to do it, simply was not working well enough for everyone back then. We thought it was, but it really wasn't, if we're really honest. And now, the game is, how do we figure out how do we work together? Where we have flexibility, we can bring in diversity and inclusion, and we can solve the challenges that we face. So it should be interesting to see which companies take this seriously and which ones see it as just, another thing to do, and we'll talk about it, but we'll just go back to how we used to work. I don't think we'll see those companies in business in a few years.
Yeah, it's interesting from the university's perspective, in terms of how we've embraced it and are kind of building out our hybrid working strategies. And part of you kind of thinks, I've worked in the university sector for a long time, that we would all just return to campus, and that, the bricks and mortar would be a key feature again of universities, but it's totally disrupted our engagement and how we work. And students are driving a lot of that in terms of what they expect from us now that we've kind of gone through COVID, and okay, we had an emergency response to educating, But then in the second year of COVID, it was a thoughtful, and it was designing for online and building content, and students just love the idea of being able to have that kind of self-service education on their terms instead of within the classroom. So it's been hugely transformative, and looking to build on that and to continue to support the student journey on their terms instead of what we expect or what we think they need, and that moving from the assumptions to the facts. So my final question for our panel is around looking to advice you would give to females looking to lead, based on both your experiences of COVID, but also you are all leaders in your field, and what advice you would give to others. And we also, just a reminder to our attendees that if you'd like to send on a question for our panel, we'd be happy to take it after this question. So Marianne, I might ask you in terms of advice that you would give to females in terms of leading in their roles or looking for other opportunities.
Yeah, so I think that my main point is for women to look for opportunities and go for it. I think that like the main thing that holds us back is because we always think that for you to apply to that job, you need to be 100, you need to fill the 100% the criteria, otherwise you're not good enough. Which on the other side, for men, if they had like 2 of the 10 criteria there, they will think, oh yeah, that's good, I'm gonna go for it. So I think that we should be more, open for opportunities and open to receive no from people, because that is the only way that you're gonna find a place in the world, is that if you try so many times, if you hear no so many times, that at some point you're gonna hear yes, and you need to be comfortable with it. So yes, I think that is my main advice for women, is to put yourself out there, and don't be afraid of what the others will think about you. And if they think that you're not good enough, you need to be confident, you need to put yourself there, and you have to stop judging yourself and being perfectionist as well. So otherwise we're always going to be in the same place, and we're not going to achieve the leadership positions that we should be at today. And the other thing is accept that we have different leadership styles, because I believe that one of the other main issues is that most of our role models, as leaders, they are men, and they do have a different personality than we have today. So we think that we don't have what it takes to be a good manager, to be a good leader, because you don't look like the models that you see out there. I think that we can be feminine. We don't need to be aggressive. We don't need to be, super focused in a way. Like, I mean, even the way that we talk is different. So we need to accept that that is just a different leadership style, but doesn't mean that that's the wrong way. Yeah. So I think that's the 2 points that I want to make here today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marianne. Tanya, what about you? Would you have any?
Yes, so many comments on what Marianne said, but it's really interesting because I was having a conversation the other day about how, many women in leadership positions have taken on these male qualities. And that's why we succeeded. And it's about like, how do you unlearn those?
Yeah.
And bring back the sort of female leadership. So it's something I'm trying to work on as well. It's really interesting. But in terms of, I totally agree with Marianne. You have to lean in and advocate for yourself. And I always use this quote, which is from this HR guru, which says, don't self-eliminate. Yeah. Like, don't eliminate yourself from the role. We do that so much. I totally agree with you, with your comments. The other thing I'd say is, this is what has helped me, is so during the pandemic, I thought about my values, and I think it really helps to sit down and think about what are your values in life and what are your goals and what are you passionate about, and have that as a signpost. And then if you're looking for a job, find a company whose mission sort of aligns with those values, because if you agree with the company's mission and if you feel passionate about it, your job becomes sort of a source of energy instead of a source of drain. And I have really found that in my current company, you know, being so passionate about addiction, I'm never tired. People say to me, oh, you work so hard, like, why aren't you tired? I'm just not, because it gives me the energy to work. So I'd say that. And then the other thing, if you're looking for a promotion or if you're trying to advocate for yourself within your company, I can't recommend enough joining a women's group, you know, a women's networking group, even like the HBA that Michael was referring to as well, an external one or internal one. If you don't have one in your company, then ask for it. I founded the Women's Network in my company right now because we didn't have one. And then, you know, also looking for mentors as well, reaching out to people who you see as a role model, whatever gender, and just say, how did you get there, and help me, you know, help me get there. Sorry, I talked a lot, but I'm very passionate about this subject.
No, it comes across, and all really, really important comments that we do need to consider. Michael, from your perspective, and particularly in your coaching role, what would your advice be?
Well, I will say that Marianne and Tanya just gave our listeners some great advice.
Absolutely, yeah.
The advice I would give is breathe. Create some space to breathe. I was just talking to one of my clients who is CFO for an agency that feeds into pharma. Tanya and I were talking about this earlier today before we got together on Zoom. You need to breathe. We're going at 1,000 miles an hour. Women that we've already talked about play so many different roles at home as head teacher, chief medical officer, you name it. Many women I know put themselves last, even behind the family dog. That the only moment you have to really think and to breathe is when you use the restroom or take a shower. And for you to be a very effective executive, to climb into those ranks, you need to find some time to be still and be thoughtful and be intentional. So Tanya mentioned knowing your values and having that be a signpost. Well, then each day you get to set your intentions. How do you wish to honor your values? Like, live a life of alignment. You need space in order to do that. You can't do that if your days are chock full with one Zoom after another with no space. So my encouragement is find time for you to have some space in your life, even if it's small chunks. You might not have a 20-minute chunk to do this, but maybe you have 20 times during the course of the day where you have a minute or 2 minutes. And just take that time to slow down, catch your breath, let go of whatever stress you may be carrying, and decide how you want to show up next. What kind of ripple do you want to put into the world? So be thoughtful, live intentionally. So I think that's one of the best ways to manage a good career or create a good career. So that's my advice. The risk of not doing it is burnout. It's overwhelm, it's anxiety. And we see that happening with far too many today. The burnout conversation is a real one. And if we're not taking moments to recover, then burnout is probably around the corner for many people.
Thanks, Michael. I think there was so much richness in terms of the panel discussion this evening. It's actually difficult to wrap this one up. I suppose from my perspective, and my key takeaways are, yes, it's absolutely about that creation of space. And as Tanya talked about, that kind of that self-belief and owning your leadership style and understanding that it is different, as Marianne said, and not compromising on your authentic self to advance, that you don't need to do that. That, you know, there are loads of opportunities and roles out there, and it is about finding that job that makes you passionate, where you know you love what you do and your role brings you joy. I think a common thread this evening was also the power of human connection. And I think COVID has disrupted that and challenged that in terms of how we connect, but there are many different ways that we are connecting. And I think the comment about, you know, meeting people online, not for work, just to be with your colleagues and to be in that environment and seeing them as humans, I think is really valuable, because sometimes I think we only come to work, but there is that social aspect to it. But when you're in the online world, carving out that time to connect with people at an individual and collective level, I think it is really important. And definitely as we kind of look to nurture and grow the next generation of female leaders, it's kind of taking what was a pause that COVID brought for so many of us and factoring that into our daily lives, so that we do take that time to reflect and consider and think, is this serving me? So I think with that, I'd like to thank our panel. It has been hugely inspiring for me, and I have copious amount of notes in terms of bringing them back here and kind of having a discussion with my own team. I look forward to re-listening to the podcast, because I think when you're in a room like this and you leave, it's nice to reconnect. So I would recommend that to anybody who's maybe here this evening to check out the podcasts. All of our guests this evening have a podcast session. So if you'd like to learn more about them, connect in with the podcasts. And thank you all, and have a lovely rest of the evening.
You're welcome, Natalie. Good to be here.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.